Good evening and welcome to Global Resources for Men. I'm your host, Alicia Buss, and on tonight's show we have John Bruggerman. He is a Marine veteran, a father, husband of 32 years, and executive director of Living Free Together. Tonight we're going to be talking about when the mission changes, the identity, fatherhood, especially like as they get older, and life after the military. John, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Well, let's just jump right into it, John. Like, what do you feel like an obstacle is that you've overcome during the course of your life in history?
I think, the biggest obstacle for me, or the biggest at least change in my life, was when I retired out of the military. So as you mentioned, I was in the United States Marine Corps, served for more than 20 years.
A long time.
Entered as a young single guy, and while I was in the Marine Corps, got married and we had kids, and life played out. And 20 some years later, it was time to move on to the next chapter. And you hear a lot of people talk about that transition, leaving the military and figuring out what's next. Um, my wife, Marie, thought for sure that was really going to be a hard thing for me. And I was confident, like, I got this, I've got a plan. This is all going to work out. Um, and and it was I don't know how it felt for other people, but for me it really did feel like it wasn't that hard of a transition. I got out of the Marine Corps, we moved to a new place, we settled into a new town, our kids were in school, I got a great new job, and everything seemed good. um, but like a lot of folks from my kind of generation in the military, uh, I think there were some things going on in the background that I wasn't focused on, I wasn't prepared for. And so in the
Mm,
end, it was more work than it felt like it was going to be, and it took a lot longer for me to fully kind of make that transition and process those big changes. Um, and I needed a lot more help than I thought I would. I kind of felt like, you know, I, I'm capable. I do things on my own all the time. I can figure this out. But it really did take a few years of feeling like I was just sort of spinning my wheels, to realize that I needed some help to sort of figure all that out. But the good news is, there were plenty of people out there that were able and willing to help, and sure enough, I got through it, and I think probably the last 5 years of my life and my life with my wife and my kids have been the best we've ever had.
mm. No, I love that. When you say like you were spinning your wheels and it really surprised you how much harder it was, like what were some of the emotions that were going through that? What were some of the stories that you told yourself during that period?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the tricky thing for me, what I feel like I was feeling a lot of frustration, um,
Hmm.
and probably a little bit of anger, which I think is not unusual for veterans. Some of the things that were frustrating to me were feeling like I felt like I left a team in the military, a bunch of people that were all working together to accomplish a common goal. And I joined a company that felt in a lot of ways like it was also a team. But what I didn't anticipate was that even on that team, with a bunch of people who liked each other and worked well together, there were a lot of different agendas. And in the military, there was always this kind of underlying sense of, we have a mission. We all know what that mission is, and we're all focused on that mission. We have other things going on in our lives. We have other priorities, but when push comes to shove, I know I can count on everybody else to make the same commitment that I'm making to putting our mission first. Um,
Yeah.
and I just sort of assumed that it would be the same way in other places. And it makes sense that it's not always. And so when I started to realize that there were people that I thought were on my team, and then other things came up, and I realized, oh, they have other priorities, and just because my priority or our company's priority is going in this direction doesn't mean they're going to drop drop what they've got going on at home or in other places and make this their
Mm,
number one priority, they'll do their part and they'll help out. But we have to make room for these other things that they have going on. And so that's where I started to, I think, feel some frustrations. I would wonder, like, what's going on with these people? Don't they realize how important this is? Our company's
yeah.
depending on them. Um, and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to process that. I didn't have the understanding that I needed to kind of think about things from their perspective. Um, and so it took me a while to realize that's part of being a team in a lot of ways as well, is understanding that all your teammates have other things going on too, and we've got to work together to figure out how to accomplish our priority while still supporting one another through all these difficult times. And so yeah, so that was an adjustment that took me a while to pick up on.
Yeah, no, I can well imagine. What is just coming up for me in that moment of curiosity is, do you feel that there's a layer of like self-abandonment that happens in the military? Like, how do you find that discernment and balance?
Yeah,
Which probably like also leads into the sacrifices, the unseen sacrifices of family, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. That was and the military, I don't mean to paint it as like this 100% collection of selfless people who were willing to do whatever was absolutely necessary. But
yeah, I get it.
um, there was that sense of, in units that trained together and worked well together. And I was an infantry officer, so I was in infantry units for most of my career, and units like that trained for a specific mission. And then during the time that I was in the military, we were very active overseas, and so you really did develop that trust with the other people in your unit. And in many cases, there was real evidence of sort of self-sacrifice, self-abandonment. Like, um, you know, a lot of the people I worked with had sort of emotionally committed to doing what they needed to do, understanding that there could be consequences for their own safety, and
Mhm.
therefore on the rest of their lives, on their families back home and things. Um, and not everybody, certainly not everybody was enthusiastic about that. But the bottom line was that I think in most cases you knew that if you really found yourself in trouble, there were people who would put themselves at risk to help get you out of there. And
Yeah.
um, and so that, I think that's one of the things when you hear veterans talk about, you know, their experiences in the military, and that sense of trust, and their combat buddies, the people that they uh, counted on.
Yeah.
It was real, and despite the fact that you might leave the military and join a great team elsewhere, I think it's probably pretty rare to feel that same sort of kind of wholehearted commitment that you experience in the military. Um, which again can be confusing, and it's a little bit disorienting. It was for me, at least. I didn't spend enough time actually consciously thinking about what to expect from other people, and what that would mean for me. I just sort of went into it assuming I was going to be willing to make the same sort of sacrifices that I had in the past, and that everybody else was probably going to do the same. But that was unfair of me to sort of make that assumption.
Thank you for sharing all of that with us. It is a hard thing to come to, right? Like when you come from a place in infantry, I imagine, where people literally put their life on the line for you, and that you would do that for others. And in the world that we live in as civilians, like that level of commitment is rare, depending on where you live. And so coming back into a space and be like, well, this is how much heart and soul I have that I'm willing to give to you, and people don't have that capacity or even comprehension,
Mhm.
and finding that way, like you're talking about, that you felt like it's unfair to ask that of another person. Like we can't expect other people to love us and have the same sort of willingness to give as some of the rest of us do. Like that can
Mhm.
be a hard lesson that people can go decades without understanding, even if
Yeah,
they're not military, right? You just like
yeah,
love more wholeheartedly. It doesn't make other people bad, right? It just means that that's just not how they're built or how they express themselves,
right.
etc.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, like what was your road to compassion, both for yourself and for other people in that same line of thought?
Yeah. Well, I think probably not unlike a lot of other veterans. Um, as I was saying earlier, I transitioned out of the military and I thought I was doing great. Got a job, we got a new house in a new town, got kids into schools, and everything was going well. And and but in the background, I started to realize things uh, weren't all the way they as good as they appeared. The frustrations, the anger, I was having some kind of road rage type issues, and my wife was the one who really picked up on it, not surprisingly. And and she would ask me about it, like, how are you feeling? What's going on? And maybe like a lot of other veterans, I was like, what are you talking about? I'm doing fine. What do you mean? Um,
Yeah.
and it really did take a couple of incidents that caused me to stop and take notice. Like, okay, that I can't believe that was me that just did something like that. That doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Even then, it took a little while for me to acknowledge that there was something going on that I didn't understand and that I needed some help with. Um, for me, that kind of path to figuring that all out sort of um, had three legs to it. Uh, at the center of it all was my wife. Again, she not only kind of was the one to identify the issue and not let me off the hook, but gently keep pushing me. But she found the organization that I'm now involved with, Living Free Together, which is a nonprofit here in Charlottesville that looks for people like the guy I was back then, that veterans and military families that need help for whatever reason, going through transition or just experiencing difficult times in life, or just looking for some other people who had shared experiences and want a sense of community. And in our case, um, the woman who founded the organization and still runs all the programs, um, she and my wife kind of shared some time together, and Marie was explaining to her what was happening at home. And she was able to provide some insight and some support and some guidance that was critical to my wife being able to kind of understand what she was seeing and help me to understand as well. Um, the second part was thankfully I found a great help in a counselor through the Veterans Administration, which um,
Nice.
I hear, a lot of people have unpleasant experiences with the VA, unfortunately. It's
Yeah.
a big bureaucracy, and at their heart, there's a lot of people there trying to do good things and help veterans, but it doesn't always work out so well. So you do hear, I think, a fair share of frustrating stories. In my case, I've really had good experiences, and it took me a couple of tries to get matched up with somebody that I clicked with, but I ended up with a counselor who really uh, understood me, I think, and was able to kind of lead me through some of that and talk about what was going on. So that was a big thing. And then for us, the third part was my wife and I were attending a church at the time that that was really helpful. And so the pastor there spent some time with us as a couple, and he was a former military as well, and so had a little bit of
Nice.
insight into that. And it was really that combination of three things. I think if any one of those had been missing, I don't know that things would have gone the same way. But my wife was getting support through Living Free Together. I was getting the help I needed through a really great counselor. And then together as a couple, we were getting some help from somebody who had a little bit of empathy for me and a little understanding of what we were going through. Um,
Nice.
and so those things all came together and made a huge difference in my life individually, in our lives as a couple and as a family.
I love that. What would you say to men who are struggling with that old masculine viewpoint of like, we don't talk about our problems, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's it's um it's tough, right? Because it's that exact um sort of attitude. I don't know if attitude's even the right word, but that approach is what makes it so hard. I mean, I was guilty of that. I was telling myself and telling my wife and telling other people, I don't know what the big deal is. I'm fine. This stuff happened to me a long time ago, and I've dealt with it. I don't need to talk about it anymore.
right.
Um, all the while, probably there was a little voice in my head saying that's not true, and it's not true. But it was that sense of like, if I just keep telling myself that, it'll pass, right? I'm going to get through this. I can figure it out. I'm a smart guy. It'll take care of itself. And um, for some people, it probably does. Everybody's situation is different. Um, I think I think for me, finding the right person to talk to made a big difference.
Yeah, I
And
hear
that,
that.
yeah, so that I don't, that's the probably the trickiest thing, and where it's not really a piece of advice that I could give to anybody other than don't give up. If you try out a counselor and you don't click, it wouldn't be the first time. It might take you several times, but somebody out there uh, will be able to understand you and will make you feel comfortable and and earn your trust. And it's worth, you know, looking. It's worth continuing to make that effort. Um, I didn't think it was going to. It took me months to get to the point where I even felt like talking to the counselor was making any progress. It was like, okay, we just talked about the same stuff again. I guess I'll see you next
Yeah.
week. Um, but after going through that, I don't know how long, a few months, suddenly I realized walking out of the office, I actually feel a little bit better today. And so I guess the advice I would give to people who feel that way is don't give up, keep looking, and even if you've got that kind of attitude, like I don't need to talk about this, I can work it on my own. I'm pretty sure if you found the right person, you'd feel better.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different models of therapy out there that can help people, including equine facilitated mental health. Like working with horses is something that a lot of people are unaware
Yeah.
of, that that's a modality that can help them. You've got the EMDR, you've got internal family systems, the cognitive behavioral therapy, didactic, like there's so many different types and different people who have their own life stories, like your pastor who also has military experience, right? Like you can find support at church and men's groups and
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily need to be in therapy. It can be peer-to-peer support. Like just taking that first step so that people don't have to be isolated and like walk that road alone. Like there's lots of people out there that can hold that space and not judge you for the things that you've experienced. Like, especially what I've heard from some veterans that I know about, like moral injury.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel
That's
like we don't talk about that enough in society of how our veterans and active duty military and first responders are navigating that.
Yeah, that is absolutely a tricky one. And this goes back, the more I started to explore this and reading history, um, you heard about some of these different terms for the experiences and the way veterans would feel after combat, going back, to World War I, World War II, Vietnam, all those different experiences, and the kind of the way we refer to it keeps changing, but it's a lot of the same um, symptoms. And I do feel like the veteran community um, is the place where there are lots of different modalities and opportunities to find something that works for you. I just kind of here in the Charlottesville area, being involved in the nonprofit kind of veteran support community, uh, we meet groups from all over the area who are doing those sorts of things. There are groups of veterans who meet 5 o'clock every morning to work out, in a parking lot somewhere. And And it's about more than just getting a good workout in, right? It's that
Yeah.
sense of community. It's that brotherhood that maybe you feel like you've been missing a little bit since you left the military. And it's an opportunity to commune with some people with shared experiences. Uh, we bumped into a group that's based out in North Carolina that is one of these groups that serves veterans through outdoor activities. They go camping and they go fishing and they go horseback riding. There's groups that support veterans through teaching them the new skills, how to learn how to play guitar or learn fly fishing or things like that. And it's things like that that I think on the surface may not seem like therapy, like it may not seem like something that's intended to help you to understand what's going on in your head and maybe figure out what to do with all that. But sometimes I think it's as simple as uh, giving you a new mission, giving you a task to work on with others who have a shared background, and you work on that together. And before you know it, you're talking and sharing stories and hanging out together and calling each other on the weekend. And when you're struggling a little bit, you pick up the phone and call them. And when they're struggling a little bit, they pick up the phone and call you. And next thing you've got another team of people looking out for you, and you're headed down the right path. And so
Uh,
there are all kinds of those opportunities available to veterans. Sometimes it takes a little bit of looking, but I am glad to say that I think there are still lots of organizations out there that recognize that there's still a lot of veterans and military families that are struggling with their experiences, and so they're out there still trying to offer their help.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I just like love to get to think about the holistic view and the 5 a.m. workouts and
Yeah.
super
Oh yeah.
cool. And
Yep.
speaking of the families, like tell us a little bit more about like the unseen struggles that families are experiencing and like what people on deployment may be feeling, for instance, like while they're separated from their families that they don't talk
Yeah.
about that often.
Yeah. I tell people all the time that um my family had the tougher job when I was in the military. I was doing something that I loved it was my choice. It was with people that I had trained with and trusted and had confidence in, um, and my wife and kids just sort of got dragged along for the ride, and they were good times too. But but it wasn't exactly, I think, what any of them thought they were signing up for. I mean, my kids were born while we were in the military, so they didn't know anything different until we got out. But I think looking back now, they would recognize how different life was for them. Um, one of the tough things that probably people don't recognize about the military lifestyle, going back to the thought about priorities and where you emphasize your time and energy. And it was it was a challenge for us as a family, and maybe more specifically for us as a couple, to figure that piece out, because there's a lot of work to be done in a military unit before you go on deployment. My wife still tells people that the 6 months prior to a deployment were way harder than the time when I was actually gone, because once I was gone, she knew, this was the situation. She was in charge, and she knew what she had to do, and she knew when I would be back, generally speaking, and so she knew what to expect. But for the 6 months before, at least in the Marine Corps, this was the sort of typical pattern. For the 6 months before, she said it felt like I should have been home because we hadn't left yet, but that rarely turned out to be the case. The training schedules are demanding. Things are always coming up at the last minute. I can't I can't even guess at how many times I told her I would be home at whatever time on a Friday night, and hours later I still wasn't anywhere close to being home. And so that created this real sense for her that that she was competing with the military in terms of my priority.
Yeah.
And to me, that was really challenging. Like on the one hand, I'm getting ready to go on a deployment with everybody else in my unit, and they're counting on me to be as good at my job as I possibly can be, and I'm counting on them to do the same. And if we're all working together and focus on that, then our unit has the best chance to be successful. But um, there's only so much you can do. And so at some point, you're given everything you can give. And at the same time, my wife is thinking, hey, I'm here at home and we've got two kids. And here it is, Saturday night, and you're back at work again after, being gone all week. And when are you going to spend some time with us? And that was a difficult thing for us both. It was hard for me to manage. I was I was felt like I was being pulled in a couple of different directions, and
Yeah.
I didn't want to shortchange, my fellow Marines, but I also recognized that my wife was expecting things from me, and so that was tough. And then she felt the same. She felt like, we're here and you're going to be with them for this whole deployment coming up. So, we feel like we should get a little bit of time right now. Um,
Yeah.
so that was a tricky thing. And, uh, that's one of those things that starts long before you even go on your first deployment, is trying to figure out how do I juggle these priorities between, um, you know, my military peers, my unit that is counting on me, and people like my family, my immediate family, wife and kids, or friends, or siblings and parents. So wherever you kind of, whatever family situation you have in the military, that's a frequent challenge. And I think that's one that I would guess a lot of folks aren't really prepared for. They anticipate some other challenges of military lifestyle, physically demanding work and time away from home or whatever. But just even while you are home, just sort of um, balancing those priorities can be really challenging and tough to navigate as a couple and as a family.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Is there any guidance within the military that you experienced around those things?
Um, I think probably, to be fair, the answer should be there's probably some, but I think probably it varies so much from service to service and unit to unit, and even from time to time. Depending on where your unit is in terms of how soon you're getting ready to deploy, and what your mission is and where you might be headed. Um, and it depends a lot on the people who are leading those units, so the commander and the other senior leadership. Um, it, I had really great mentors and leaders throughout my time in the Marine Corps. And while there was a lot to admire about a lot of them, they're all very different in personality, like you might expect. That they're not all just a bunch of robots. So you've got some commanders who understand that you've all got families, and some of those commanders take the attitude that I want my unit to be focused on the mission when we're deployed. And if they're distracted because their family is not getting the support they need, or from them or from somewhere else, then they're not able to focus on the mission. So they make it a priority to make sure families are as well taken care of as they can be before you go, which sometimes means sending individuals home from training to go make sure that things are okay at home.
Yeah.
um, and in many cases, I saw that really work out well. That I saw that personnel in those units appreciated that and felt like their commanders understood their situation and were taking care of their families, and that really did help out. Um, but in other cases, I saw commanders who took the attitude that we're going someplace that might be dangerous, and I need everybody to be at the top of their game. And the only way we get there is by training together as a unit. And so I need all of us there together when we're out training and preparing.
Yeah.
And so in those units, there was more of an expectation that, your family will get some help, from people back on the base and the other mechanisms that are in place to support families, but that they expected the service member to really keep their focus on the training. Um, and then there's obviously all kinds of, gradients in between. And so it's a tough balance all around. And so, the best, I think, units were the ones where they recognized that it was going to be challenging for the families as well as the service members, and that the unit as a whole, whether it's the commander and leaders all the way down the line, recognize that families, would be better off if they got that kind of support, and
Yeah.
the service members would be better off if they knew their family was taken care of. And so they found a way to kind of make some time for that and make sure everybody felt cared for. Um, but it wasn't easy. But yeah, I think that especially as kind of time went on post 9/11 all the way up through 10 years ago or so, as we were in those long protracted engagements, I think that became more and more clear to the services as they were
Yeah.
seeing some of their more senior personnel deploying over and over and over again, and families were really paying a price.
Do you have any advice for people that are going through that?
Well, I wish I could say I had great advice. I guess the only advice I really have is maybe the obvious one, is that your family does matter. Like, you can't take your family for granted. And so there really does need to be some kind of a balance, as tricky as that might be in the moment, to figure out, um, you know, how do I do this? How do I split my time between this very important, preparation I'm doing with my unit and the training that we've got going on, but also taking care of my family. Um, but I think one is being aware that that's going to be a challenge. Two, being honest with your family and having conversations with them so that they understand that you're doing the best you can, you're trying to figure it out, and that they're going to be honest with you as well. If they really are struggling, then you need to know that. If they're having a rough day, but they'll figure it out and they can make it through to the weekend, then that's good to know also.
Yeah.
And then the final bit is, be honest with your chain of command as well. And I think this is another area where there's been some progress made in the military. You hear a lot about sort of the stigma associated with things like mental health in the military, and it has been a problem. I think that I'd like to say most units, most of the different services, that has gotten a lot better. And I think it's true now that there's a lot more understanding in units up and down the chain of command, that these are real issues that need to be dealt with, and you can't just sweep it under the rug and hope it goes away and assume that everybody's going to be good, because we all know that that's not how that works. And so I think being honest with your leadership about your family situation, about how well prepared they are, or what you need and they need to make them better prepared, so that you can do your job. And if that means going on a deployment and being there as part of your unit, then that's ultimately what everybody wants.
Yeah.
But they want to do it in a way that's healthy for you and your family as best they can.
Yeah. That all sounds like excellent advice.
If only I had
Speaking of,
had that for myself years ago. But yeah.
I understand. Speaking of being on deployment, are there places where people are able to talk to each other about the feelings they have about leaving their families, like any guilt, resentment, fear of cheating, like whatever those things are?
I think so. And again, there's probably a difference in different types of units and different military services. The services all have a little bit of a different persona. Um, and in my experience in the Marine Corps, uh, there's a lot of the sort of banter that happens is giving each other a hard time. Um, and sometimes that's sometimes that's actually healthy and healing. It's like you do feel like, that these are people who know you well enough that they can tease you about something and give you a hard time. But they're also there for you when you need it. And so absolutely, there are a lot of conversations that happen in the middle of the night, two people on watch together, sitting in the dark, talking about what's going on back home, what the
Yeah.
last letter was or the email they got or when they're going to be able to call home again. Um, and those kinds of things I think are really, really important. That's one of the things that I think, um, as a new member joins a unit in the military, there's sort of different customs for how that happens, but in most cases, after a little bit of a breaking in period, those kinds of bonds are formed,
Yeah.
and it's pretty typical that you see people who are serving in the same squad or the same platoon. Those are your best friends. Those are your closest buddies, and so before long, you're sharing all kinds of stuff with them about, what's going on with your mom and dad back home, or what your wife's up to, or whether your girlfriend's still going to be waiting for you when you get home. And all those
Yeah.
conversations happen at all kinds of weird times when you're out, in training or on a deployment. Um, so yeah, I think that's a really important part of the sort of mental health balance, is feeling like you have that sort of a relationship with somebody that you can share with, and then they'll share those same sorts of things with you.
Yeah. We don't need to be ashamed or hold it all in and
Yeah,
feel like we need to isolate and pretend like none of it matters.
yeah, for sure. Yep.
Speaking of which, when you come home from deployment or you become a veteran, you ease yourself out in whatever fashion. You talked about like being a dad to your kids as they were older, and that was actually
Yeah,
felt more impactful for you. Like, tell me
yeah,
a little bit more about that.
yeah. I tell you, and again, I don't, everybody's situation is different. And in the military, one of the kind of cool things that people may not realize is, my family, most of the time we lived on the military base where we were stationed. There's housing available in many cases, and at least on Marine Corps bases, and I think this is true in a lot of other of the services as well. They assign you to housing with other people who are similar rank. And so you end up with a group of neighbors who are all basically at the same kind of phase in life. They've been in the military about the same amount of time, which often results in families that have kids about the same age, and couples that have been together for about the same amount of time, and whatever. Um, so that does a couple of things. One, spouses and kids kind of have built-in friends. Right away,
Yeah.
you find spouses are have something in common, shared experiences. They've been in the military the same amount of time, had same kinds of experiences of moving around and learning new things, and so it makes it really easy for them often to sort of connect and click. And same with the kids. Um, the that's the nice thing about it then, because when a unit deploys and suddenly people disappear, there's that kind of built-in support network right in your own neighborhood. So we experienced that a lot. In fact, there was at one point in time, we were stationed at Camp Lejeune, which is coastal North Carolina, and we lived on a street. I think there were probably 8 houses on our street, and at one point, in the few years we were there at that during that time period, 7 of the 8 husbands on that street were all deployed. And there was one guy who every Saturday would go and mow all 8 lawns for all of the 8 families. And, it was pretty typical that, every weekend there'd be a sleepover, a bunch of kids coming sleeping over at one house and watching a movie, or built-in babysitters. If somebody needed to run to the grocery store, somebody else on the street would take the kids in and feed them dinner while you ran and got groceries or whatever. So that was a great support network, which was really critical because I feel like, I missed a lot of that sort of dad type stuff, So my wife did an amazing job and deserves virtually all the credit for raising our kids because up until about the time they were teenagers, um, more often than not, she was raising the kids like a single mom, and I was not around, and so as much as I enjoyed being a dad, and I did have lots of great times with my kids when they were young. But for me, I felt like after I got out of the military, um, not only did I have more time to spend with my kids, um, but they were at that phase in life where I felt like I had more dad things that I could teach them, So going through the things like, that when they're learning to drive and teaching them about how to take care of a car, or when they're, trying to figure out school, and I can talk to them about what they're interested in, want to study in, and potential careers, and then all the other kinds of things, moving into their first apartments or homes after they're finished with college, and going to help them hang pictures on the walls, or fix a leaky sink, or do whatever. Um, and and just like we were talking about with kind of in the military, when uh, two folks find themselves sitting in the dark talking about things that that it wasn't the intent, but there they are in the middle of the night on watch together, and so they end up having a deep conversation. um, my experience as a dad was that that's sometimes those are the best conversations I've had with my kids, is I'm going over to help them out with something, fix something in their apartment or on their car, and next thing you know, we're talking about what's going on with their career, or what's going on in a relationship,
Yeah.
and I'm giving them some advice, whether it's solicited for or not, but those kinds of times are really precious to me, and feel like now that I've got the time, and they're at that stage in life, I've got a lot more to share, and I certainly appreciate having that opportunity.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Did you find any struggles with them, like going from not having seen them as much in the military to like when you did retire?
Yeah, it was I think it was more it was more of my wife and I kind of figuring out roles again. Um, and so you hear this, I think, from a lot of people in the military, and certainly we experience this a bunch of times. So, um, one of the spouses goes away on deployment, the other one's home basically doing everything, and then the deployment ends, they're both back home again, and you sort of have to go through this transition period of who's doing what again, and that can be difficult for both. Uh, my wife was used to doing all this stuff, so things around the house, working out in the yard, taking care of the kids, and making all the decisions about, shopping and all that kind of thing. And then suddenly I'm back, and I want to start being involved and doing some of those things again. And I think uh, so as adults, as parents, you sort of work through that, and everybody figures that out in their own kind of way. But I can imagine it's maybe a little confusing for the kids, because they're often not included in those sorts of conversations. They just
Sure.
see mom doing the thing one day, and then the next day maybe dad's doing it, and they're not sure who to who should be doing it. So I think in our case, it was mostly just a little bit of that adjustment, like figuring out, do I still ask mom about this, or do I go ask dad about this? Um, and like a lot of things, communication is really key there. So we didn't always get that right in our case, but the more you talk about it, and talk with your kids about it, and give them the opportunity to ask questions and hear from them what's confusing and what they don't understand, I think probably makes it go more smoothly for everybody.
Yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate you sharing about that.
Yeah.
There's conversations that we don't get to hear about very often and be like, what was it like for you? And
Yeah.
like, gazing
Yeah.
back into society isn't just like hanging out with people in your job, it's the family frontier as well.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And that's probably been the most rewarding aspect of kind of the post-military life. Having a second career is great. Uh, all of that was a lot of fun for me and rewarding, but but I think being able to focus again on the family, making sure that my wife and kids knew how important they were to me, and even though it took me a little bit of time, but eventually getting that all sorted out to the point um, where I felt like I was doing it mostly right, um, has really been important. And we are blessed that our two kids are now both grown on their own, well into their own careers and relationships of their own. They both live nearby, and so we see them pretty regularly, and that has been fantastic. And so I think that
Nice.
as part of this whole journey through the military and all the adjustments there, raising a family in the military, transitioning out of the military, figuring out what that looks like for me personally, but also for us as a family. But now being able to kind of look back at that journey from the perspective of where we are now, where we're still all on speaking terms and enjoy spending time together, and everybody feels proud of our time in the military, all four of us. Uh, to me, that really feels good,
Yeah,
and makes it feel like, uh, even though there were challenges along the way, made it really worthwhile.
that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us, John.
Yeah.
Is that part of what led you to working for Living Free? Living Free
It
Together? Tell
really,
us a little bit more about what Living Free Together is.
yeah. Living Free is a great organization. It really was. So we were involved first. My wife was kind of uh, one on kind of involved by herself as I was still kind of figuring out my stuff, and then we attended events together as a couple and as a family, brought our kids, and for about a year we pretty regularly attended all of these things, and there's all different types of activities that Living Free Together offers. It's changed a little bit over the years to kind of keep up with what military families here in the area are looking for, but um, most of the time they are designed to be fun activities that you do together as a family. So it's not like going to group therapy as a family, but you're doing something fun. But there is an aspect that makes you kind of think about how you communicate as a family, or what your priorities are as a family, or how you work together as a family. And it's often subtle, and I think a lot of people don't even recognize what's happening kind of behind the scenes. But just spending that time together, and talking through it, not only with other members of your family, but then with other military families. And you're all having kind of the similar conversation about, oh, this is how it works in our family. How do you guys handle this? And
Yeah.
what was it like for you guys when you were in the military and you were deployed, or kids were in school and struggling, and you somebody wasn't home. Those sorts of conversations happen. And um, so for us, that was really instrumental in helping us to kind of zero in on where those touch points were that we needed to kind of work through and figure out how we needed to manage those a little bit. And so Living Free Together. So after participating for a year, um, my wife and I both started volunteering, and then she actually joined the board of directors, and was part of the board of directors, and she did that for a while. And then I started volunteering, and I'm involved on the board of directors, and has stepped into the role of executive director for a while, as we're kind of trying to grow the organization and expand a little bit. So it still is mostly family oriented programs. We do things occasionally that are specifically designed for veterans, or an adult partner that they are going through life with. But the majority of our programs are really intended for entire families, military families, and we take a very loose approach to the word family. In some cases, it's mom and dad and kids. In some cases, it's a military member and their parents or their adult siblings. Sometimes it's friends and neighbors who are really close with the veteran and want to kind of understand what they're going through. Um, but we try to offer programs year round, mostly spring and fall, and we try to do something at least once a month where we get these families together. We do some sort of a fun activity together and explore a little bit about what it means to be a military family. And most of our programs we offer a meal, so we get to eat a meal together. And lately we've been scheduling these for Sunday evenings after trying to figure out scheduling. Scheduling's tough with families with kids these days, but Sunday evenings seem to be a popular time because we get to hang out a little bit and give everybody dinner and then send them home. So nobody's got to cook, nobody's got to wash dishes. They get to just relax a little bit on Sunday and get ready for the week to start again. So that's a lot of what living free together looks like. And then I think the newest offering we have, which started last year, is also kind of grew out of a challenge of figuring out scheduling. Is we're now doing, I think it'll be an annual event. We'll do an overnight family retreat. So here in Charlottesville,
Mm.
we've partnered with a local camp facility. They've got beautiful cabins and great spot to do all kinds of fun outdoor activities. And so last year we had 9 families. I guess it was just this past spring. We had 9 families go for a Friday to Saturday. And they did all the typical camping things. They shot slingshots and did archery and cooked
Sounds
out and
fun.
did all that kind of stuff. Did some crafts, but also learned a lot about themselves as a family and got to interact with other military families and make new friends and enjoy some of that community together. And it was super successful. And those are the kinds of things that we feel are really important to help the veteran and the whole family to just sort of work through whatever challenges they're experiencing and do it together as a family in a healthy way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you have an event coming up soon, correct?
We do. So we're just kicking off our fall season of our Sunday evening activity. So that'll start in September. And we have a couple other in the summertime. We tend to do kind of some fun things. So last month we did a wiffle ball outing where we got a bunch of people together and played a game of wiffle ball and had a pie tasting contest. It wasn't a pie eating contest. It wasn't a challenge to see how much pie you could eat, but we were judging who had the best pie to offer. So we did that. And so we'll do our fall lineup of programming, and then we do offer a couple of big what we hope are getting even bigger events each year that are open to really the whole community. And it's partly a fundraising opportunity, and partly it's just a way to help the civilian community here around Charlottesville get to know the military community and sort of understand what life is like there. So this event is one where it's kind of a combination of hiking and an adventure course and obstacles, and we call it Ruck the Ridge. Rucking is a term for what started out as a military activity where you basically fill your backpack with everything you need and go on a long hike. And it's now become something of a fitness craze where there are clubs that go out and go for hikes and wear weighted vests or heavy backpacks. So we've adopted that to our kind of version where we go up into the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains here and climb over obstacles and do this together as a team. And meanwhile, we've got a festival kind of atmosphere going on with live music and food trucks and a lot of fun. So people should check out Ruck the Ridge. You can search for it online. It's got its own website, or go to livingfreetogether.org, and you'll find all about Living Free Together and the schedule of all our upcoming events.
Love all of that. And I've been to Wreck the Ridge. It's a lot of fun, everybody. You should go.
Yeah, it's the
So John,
best.
I love to ask this one question always to wrap it up at the end, which is who inspires you in the world today?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. There really are a lot of inspiring people, I think, if you have your eyes open enough. But this may sound corny, but I will tell you the person who's probably had the most influence on my life and certainly is an inspiration to me every day is my wife, Marie. She has talked a lot about her here during our conversation. She never gave up on me. She continued to see the good in me even when I was struggling. She encouraged me to keep working and trying to figure things out. And she does that for herself as well. I mean, none of us are perfect, but she is really dedicated to becoming a better person. And so she puts a lot of effort into doing that for herself and for our family.
I love that.
So she really has been a great example for me and for our kids of what it means to really work hard to be your best self, to be a good human, and
Mm,
it's great to have her as a partner.
I love that so much. Many thanks to her for exemplifying what a great wife and partner and just general person can
Yeah,
be. And John, thank you
absolutely.
so much for joining us here this evening and sharing about your story and your wisdom and all you do for living free.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's great talking with you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, everybody, thank you so much for watching or watching the replay posted on Global Resources for Men on my YouTube channel. And yeah, we're getting back into the swing of things. So, come back for August 31st to talk to Cameron Phillips and his journey with youth development and being a foster kid himself, and so much more. So, until next time, everybody, we'll see you later. Bye.